Hi, I'm Tommy.
Hi, I'm Nemanja. Welcome to Cloud Couch.
It's where we discuss cloud topics from a couch perspective.
Not so comfortable couch.
Okay, welcome back to Cloud Couch. This is a new episode and we're continuing our series around cloud. So in the first episode we were discussing why cloud. In the second episode we were looking at cloud adoption. And in this episode we're going to continue with the corporate, the enterprise. So I'm going to continue to be CEO here and get the help of Nemanja.
Yes.
And we're going to look at now the continuation. So now we have, just to kind of clarify what we have done so far, or where we are. So as we remember from previous episode, we were talking about cloud adoption, and there are business topics to deal with, and there are also technical or technology topics to deal with. And now we're going to talk about the technology side a bit more in detail. And what we have done is that we have looked through all the applications and workloads that my enterprise, my corporation has. So we have the full list. And now what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to look at preparing the cloud, so the whole foundation.
Yeah.
So that in the next episode after this, we're going to look at actually migrating over applications and workloads. So now it's really about the foundation there. So
Exactly. So this is like a part where if you are on-premise enterprise with on-premise data center and applications and data there, and you can think about you're living in a castle and you have like all your cars prepared, drivers are there and they're touring the cars and they're ready to go, and you open the door. So we're talking about now laying the foundation so that when you open the door and you're ready to go to the cloud, that there are roads and that there are signs where to go so that you don't get stuck in the mud when you start.
That's
so
good.
that's the cloud foundation part that we're going to talk about. Some things that enterprises need to think about, need to do before making any kind of activity in the cloud. Be it migrating applications there, or they're doing a brand new cloud native development, all depending on that, what we've seen in previous episode, application inventory and those 6 paths, how you can go. Now, whichever path you choose, this foundation needs to be there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just also to mention the 6 different paths, or let's say, it's not like exclusively you're going to choose one path. It's just these are 6 basically patterns how you're going to move over or not move over applications.
And you will
workloads.
have a combination
Yeah,
of these.
exactly.
Yes.
Okay, so how do we start?
How do we start? Yes. So in this example, in this episode, if I use some services, service names, they're going to be AWS service names. Let's say we're making assumption here that we're moving to AWS cloud. But these concepts apply to any cloud. I mean, you can find equivalent services in other clouds as well. It's just because I know AWS, so I will talk about these.
Yeah, and also of course conceptually what we're doing is very high level, because it's okay. We are on premise. We want to be in cloud, and we need to prepare the baseline basically in the cloud, the foundation, before we can move over everything or anything.
Yeah. So let's discuss that. So I would say first thing to think about is the identity part. So when I talk about identity, that means access to your cloud environment. So both human access and programmatic access. By human access, I assume people who have a need to log into the cloud and do something. Those can be administrators, developers, testers, DevOps, whoever needs to do something in the cloud environment. Programmatic access are applications that need to interact with different services. So when thinking about these like identity topic, right? We need to know how do we structure our users. So where are the users first coming from? Do we have already users created in some LDAP Active Directory that we want to reuse and just map them to equivalent cloud roles? Or do we want to start from scratch and create a different set of users in a different tool? Or do we want to connect these two through a single sign-on set of services? That can be definitely done.
Yeah. So as we know, in the enterprise world, we most likely have, in my case, we have an Active Directory where everybody sits. So we are assuming that's in most cases that's already in place and exists.
I would say that's the de facto standard. So every enterprise, every large corporation has already 50 to 200,000 users defined somewhere, grouped somewhere. They have different membership and they would like to reuse that. Nobody's gonna redo that in any cloud you choose. So for that you use something called Federated Access. So basically you're linking those directories with your environment, your cloud environment, and you are then assigning them different roles. So basically you are, let's say, mapping the group memberships with the roles that each role in the cloud then has certain access privileges and certain access rights. So that applies to both, as I said, human access and programmatic access, and it's all part of the identity work. Now, usually the question is, how good is good enough, right? You can go and create really to the tiniest little detailed permission controls in the cloud, but sometimes that takes too much time. It's very demanding, and you don't really need to go to that level. It's a evolution, right? You can start at certain level and then expand from there. Important is map a certain set of roles to start with. Admins, DevOps, developers, testers. Give them certain access rights in the cloud. And then later on, as you evaluate their behavior in the cloud with a set of services that we can talk about, you can reduce their permission set or expand where needed.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Like, usually, obviously, it depends on the size of the organization and many other factors, but also like how broadly do you go in the beginning? You kind of onboard everybody usually, like all the users that will be in cloud, or you might start with also part of a large enterprise, most likely. I
yes.
guess.
So you go in batches. If you go with as I said, it's always good to start small and give access to only a couple of users. I mean, generally, when you think about security controls in the cloud, you start from something that is called like a root user, and from there then you develop set of admin users, then under them different set of user bases that belong to different groups and have reduced set of permissions. And when you start thinking from the top, this is where most powerful users need to have the most of the security controls around them. So here we talk about multi-factor authentication, best practices in handling passwords, password rotations, and a lot of good hints how to do that. In AWS, for example, you have this like well-architected framework that talks about security controls around your accounts.
Yeah. Maybe I also comment on that. If we just go back to we just did the whole application inventory, what my organization has, my company has, and I would assume that we already know for sure the business critical applications, and we know the most likely starting points where we're going to migrate once we have put the baseline. So I would assume that we probably have already discussed that we're going to take these applications maybe in the first round, which means that when we talk identity, we have much less users and also much less
just users that are just needed for operating those set of applications.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's like a pilot phase.
Makes sense.
Then while we are in this identity, is like we need to also discuss, do we have a proper validation of these controls, security controls that we have built? So there is a lot of security services in AWS that help you with that. I mean, we can talk about AWS Config service that shows you how your environment was changing over time. So you can evaluate what users have been doing in your environment. Was it too much access to certain users so that they were able to spin up new resources or create some other changes, or some users were they complaining that they don't have enough access rights? So you can use different set of analyzers, access analyzers, and services that are showing you the evolution of your environment to determine who should have proper security controls. And always like to monitor and verify that everything is working as it is. I mean, there are also large number of services. I would just mention one called Aws Security Hub that gives you like a dashboard view, ingesting a lot of different logs from different services in your environment to show you the compliance with certain rules that you have set in place. Right.
Okay. So now we have discussed identity. So what would be next step, or what are other things?
Yeah. So I would say the next would be, once you have created identity controls and identified the users, now you start thinking about your account structure in the cloud. So when we talk about account structure, this is where you need to reflect like how do you do that inside your organization, right? Do you want to have accounts that are mapped to your business units, for example? So in AWS, for example, there is a service called AWS Organizations where you can consolidate all of your accounts and sub-accounts in one tree, where the like a master account starts and it has sub-accounts grouped into something called organizational units. So how do you want to structure that? Do you want to use business units as your organizational units? Or do you want to maybe look inside your departments and say, shared services department is one unit. Then finance department is another unit. Back office, HR functions is a separate unit. So this is the account structure that you need to think about. What would reflect best in the cloud, and then under those come physical accounts, right? That need to be created, and they also many enterprises are making accounts per applications, and not just one account per application, but several accounts per application. Because think about, if you have one application, you would want to have a separate account for dev, for test, for pre-prod and production. If we're talking about hundreds of applications, we're talking about hundreds of those sub-accounts in the organizational unit tree with different stages for each application. Don't be afraid of creating a lot of accounts, because in the cloud, in AWS, account is the highest isolation group, let's say, of your resources and services. So by having a lot of accounts that are dealing with little things, let's say just one environment of one application in one business unit, you're really reducing your blast radius. So if anything gets compromised here, it won't affect other applications and other units.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's the gist here to understand, is that we're just using organizational units and accounts to think about how we want to structure things and organize, group things, and this grouping will come into topics like security, access, billing, and all kinds of other things. Also just logically how you're thinking about applications, but very much also the organization itself, like you're saying. So that makes a lot of sense. And what are so obviously there's a high flexibility, or it really depends how many accounts, what kind of accounts, really depends on how's the organization, what are the applications. But what are some of the let's say accounts that always exist there? You mentioned one, there's like a master account for the organization. Are there some other accounts that you would start with, because it's kind of like the base.
Yes, sure. So when we talk about setting up account structure, no matter what strategy you choose, having your sub-accounts grouped in business units or departments or something else, there are always set of accounts that you can think that they need to be there, right? So, for example, logging account, where the logs from all other sub-accounts need to be shipped to, so that in this logging account you can have applications that are monitoring and inspecting logs from all other accounts, and then they can take certain measures. It can be like automatic measures, or creating some alarms to different groups that something is when something is detected, something is happening. So logging account. Then there could be another like security account, where you define your different roles that let's say external systems need to federate into, and then assume roles to go into other sub accounts, and put other let's say security related tools. It can be third party tools that do different kind of inspections of the traffic, for example, and detect different anomalies and so on. So there are these set of accounts that I would say they always come into, like, I always like to, when I'm setting up account structure, also to have like experimentational organizational unit where you have like a set of sandbox accounts to give internal departments and employees possibility to play around, right? It's not related to any application, not related to any department or business unit, but just a sandbox. So give them possibility to feel the cloud power in those accounts. Of course, those accounts need to have certain restrictions and controls to be set up, so that they don't make a huge bill at the end of the month, or make some security incident. So there are some best practices how to create these sandbox accounts, but they're good to be there, I would say.
Yeah.
And maybe before we go further is like, what happens if you don't have these things?
Yeah,
right?
Let's say we skip it.
Let's say we skip it.
We don't have time.
Yes, a usual issue actually.
Yeah.
Something definitely that I advised against. Right. So make time for setting up cloud foundation. Skip things later, but don't skip the foundational things, because it is very hard to roll back some things. Like, let's say if we talk about account structure, if you put everything in one account, right? And I've seen that, like companies just want to go quickly into the cloud. They open one account, they put everything there, make a lot of dependencies, and then it's hard to untangle that and hard to split into other accounts. So do it properly the first time. The same with identity. I mean, companies usually, because there is no deeper understanding of roles and groups or users who should get what. And sometimes it is also difficult to create, let's say, access policies that are so fine-grained that they just apply to you and it's enough for you to use it, right? So they decide to give like admin access to everybody, like whatever this pilot group, let's say, is. And once you do that, it's very hard to take it away, right? It's like, I like to use this analogy, like if you have a gorilla and banana, and you take banana away, I mean, you're going to get the gorilla as well.
Yes.
So these guys are not going to get so comfortable and so easy that you take away their admin access. They're going to fight against this. They're going to be this gorilla coming after you.
Get a fist.
Yes. So get a proper set of access privileges and access levels, and then they can ask for more if needed, and then you can set a proper governance process to assess, do they really need more, and should I give them more or not. Right. So this is the identity and account structure that we discussed. Now, after that comes creating of so now really laying up those roads, right? Where we have been now doing just sort of the shell is there of this new shiny
place,
Wakanda city. You're going from your castle, 13th century castle, to the brand new Wakanda.
Yes.
So it's Now, putting up the roads, that would be something that's quite often we call setting up a landing zone, right? A landing zone are putting set of services inside these accounts that you have opened that can help you quickly provision new accounts, that can help you setting up the baseline in these other newly provisioned accounts. In AWS, for example, there is a very helpful service for that called Control Tower that can create for you a landing zone based on some best practices that we have, and setting up a different guardrails that can let's say, prevent users from doing common mistakes, let's say. So this kind of landing zone is there to really give you a foundation based on best practices that you can start from, and then you can build on top of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we have, just to summarize, so we have organization, we have accounts, we have identity under control, and now we also have various services in order to help us with this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then I would mention two more, and then we can wrap up the foundation part. And one is thinking about networking, right? So it is a bit sort of delusional to think that companies are just gonna at once migrate everything to, let's say, the cloud and immediately nuke their castle and say we're not going to do anything with this.
Burn it.
Burn it. Yes. So
no way back.
There is always for large corporations there is always, or for a long period of time, there's going to be both on-premise data center and cloud, and you need to think about connecting these two. So creating a networking concepts that and using networking services to connect these two. There are lots of ways how to do this. You can get dedicated lines from cloud vendors and use the services, like in AWS would be like a direct connect to connect these two. But also you need to think about security controls and so different firewalls and proxies. How do you control the traffic in between? How do you monitor what is leaving your data center, what is coming back in your data center, and the same thing in the cloud.
Yeah.
So this is the networking foundation that needs to happen. Also, if you think about now that you have a lot of accounts, there are some thinking behind linking those accounts, which also goes into like a networking part. Like, how do you link different services, different resources in those accounts if they have to share something, right? So as we mentioned, that there is like couple of usual accounts that you create, like a security account, logging account. I can think about the shared services account, where you put some shared resources that every other account needs. So how do you link that to others? So you can use some of the networking services to do that, and that requires also a little bit of thinking in this foundational part. How do you do the networking piece?
Yeah, absolutely, and I would just imagine that that's something when you're looking through your applications, you of course also know how are these interconnected.
Yes.
How do they work together? So you have all the dependencies, and then you make decisions on, do you put them in individual accounts? Do you group them? And if they're in individual accounts and they have a dependency, obviously you need a connection. So this is that architecture of how you're moving over basically the network of applications. I mean the network, not the network, but how they're connected, interconnected, and how you model that in the cloud.
So just let's give one example, and here I'm going to refer about AWS concepts and services. So something that I would see belonging to this cloud foundation piece of work. Let's say if you are in if we're looking at one account now for one application, where we can use something called shared VPC, shared virtual private cloud. And this concept is created especially for the organizations that have separate teams. Let's say they have infrastructure team, and infrastructure team is different to the application team. So shared VPC gives you a possibility that infrastructure engineers set up the networking concepts like internet gateways, NAT gateways, routers, firewalls in their VPC that they own in their account. And then application owners from different accounts can place their resources, let's say their applications on their EC2 instances, inside those shared VPCs and reuse the networking concepts that were set by experts, by network engineers from that company. So the application developers, they don't have to think about any of the networking stuff. They just develop the applications and then throw them there, knowing that that application will have connection to internet if needed, or to some other services, that it will be properly protected and so on. So those are the networking concepts to think about when laying down the cloud foundation. But as you said, it is also application specific. So in certain accounts, thinking about the dependencies and how applications should behave, that you should also look through that lens, so through the application lens.
Okay, so that was now networking. So what would come after that?
Right, I would see there's just one more thing in the setting up of the cloud foundation, and that would be service baselining. So what do I mean by service baselining? It's actually having a list of approved services to be used in the cloud. Why is that important? It is, let's say, when you first decide in which region you want to go and where you want to put your data and applications, selection of this region depends on the distance to your end users, so latency, then regulations, are certain regions, are they compliant with some local laws and regulations that you need to be compliant to as well. So selection on this region also assumes using services that are in this region. If we take a look at AWS, for example, not all regions have all the services available. Services are getting rolled out slowly. Usually they show up first in the US East one, that's North Virginia, and from there they go to Ireland, to London, and then the two other regions as well. So you have to take a look at the region, what services are there. Based on that, you are going to narrow your list down. Then, depending on the industry you're in, and if you're building a certain application that needs to have some kind of regulatory requirement, let's say you're in the credit card processing business, you need to be compliant with PCI DSS, right? So there are a set of services that are PCI DSS compliant, and in AWS, when you go on a public compliance page, you will see those services. That again narrows down your list of approved services to be used.
And just so I can ask here, what's the reason why you want to narrow down services on the list? Why not just give everybody everything? Then everybody's happy, I guess.
Exactly for that reason. You don't want everybody to be happy. No, the thing is, there are lots of services. There are over 220 or 230 services in AWS that are available to be used. And some services are on the level of, let's say, minimum viable product. AWS, like any other company, is a software development company, and some services are sometimes coming with bugs, and you don't want to be early adopter of services. You should use services that are used by a large number of customers, that have been proven, and that there are enough documentation examples out there. The community is large, and that's why you want to control a set of services that you give to your developers. From the security perspective, just like to reduce the blast radius and possibilities of something going wrong, you can start with a smaller set of services. Then you reevaluate every 3 to 6 months, and then you expand this list. But just giving everything in the beginning is just like giving a chainsaw to a child and say,
do whatever.
Go wild, do whatever. So
make something nice.
I mean, companies have enterprise architecture teams, right? So these teams should, in the cloud sense, should be transformed into cloud enterprise architecture teams, and they are the one to maintain this kind of list as a standard approved list of services, and should be like a governance process how this list is evaluated and checked. The good thing about AWS is that you have a possibility to control usage of these services. So we spoke about AWS organization as a service. There you can define service control policies where you can allow only this set of services to be used in your organizational units and sub-accounts. Everything else is not allowed. So even if you try, you won't succeed because it is going to be denied automatically. So this is the service baselining based on the maturity of services. When I mention now maturity of services, when the new services show up, they're not also integrated with the rest of the ecosystem in, let's say, in AWS. For example, infrastructure as code services, they don't support brand new feature of every service, like CloudFormation and CDKs. They don't support, they're developing, they're following, but it's not always at the front line. So when a new service feature gets released, you don't automatically have a support from other services and integration. So it's good not to be early adopter. Take a step 1-2 versions behind, and then you will be sort of on a good way forward.
Yeah, makes sense.
So that's it. I think that would be, from my perspective, like all the parts that are needed for this first cloud foundation phase. Yeah, and with this service baselining, I think, in my view, I have completed a list of what is needed for this cloud foundation step. You know.
Okay, excellent. So maybe I can quickly summarize what that was all inside. So we started out with identity, which is both the humans and also all kinds of applications and machines that need to connect.
Yes.
And after that, we took a look at the organization and accounts. This is, of course, very much a point of view of AWS, but it's basically how do you want to model your organization, which is including the humans, the organizations, but also very much the applications you want to run. How is that going to look like? And then on top of this, we looked at the landing zone, which is essentially looking at the base services of each of these accounts or pieces, what is needed, which for AWS, what it would look like. Services like Config, CloudWatch, CloudTrail. It's basically the
service catalog.
The lowest level of services for logging, for understanding.
That are mandatory almost in every account to be present. Yes, that's why it's still in the foundation part. Yeah.
Right. And then after that, what we looked at was network or networking, which includes everything from having the main road from your on-prem to cloud, which is either then VPN or can be any other type of connectivity. And then we were looking at also the interconnectedness within the cloud, can be between accounts depending on how you're modeling that. And then last, now we looked at service baselining, which is selecting and narrowing down both the attack surface to be in control of the different services that you want to provide for your also humans, developers, and so on, but really what you also need for the applications that you will be running and so on. The idea is really to have just the services that you need to have and maybe a few more based on maybe some other needs that are coming in the future.
Exactly, that are actually linking to your application inventory that you did first. So you know when you start mapping those applications to cloud native designs, you will see what kind of services you need, and this list will give you some guidance in that sense, what you should use and what you shouldn't use. Right.
Okay, so that's really the summary, or every piece here, if we look at it from a almost perfect way, or how you should be doing it by the book. And so let's try to understand, what does it look like in your view and your experience? What does it look in reality? In projects.
Yeah, so I would say from everything that we discussed in this episode, probably service baseline is something that almost nobody's doing. I've only seen in the last 5 years one company having a service baseline list.
And what? So why is that? And what happens when you ignore that?
Why is that? It's I think in general, companies when they start cloud journey, they're overwhelmed with activities and with unknowns and with things they have to do, and this is something that is probably last on their priority list, even though it shouldn't be. If they don't do it, what happens is that let's say you are creating an application that, as we mentioned, needs to be compliant with, I don't know, PCI DSS, for example, standard, and then one of your developers starts using a service that is not compliant, right? So if you don't notice that, and you notice it later on when you're halfway through the development, you need to migrate. Then you need to take this service out, put some other in, re-architect half of the things. So it costs time and money if you don't do it. So that's why I think it's important. The service baseline is probably the one thing that in reality you don't see very often. The second thing is identity, I would say, because identity, it's easiest just to give admin access to everybody, right? And we'll figure it out later, and then you never figure it out because whatever is like
it's the gorilla.
It's the gorilla, yes, exactly. It's the gorilla. There are too many bananas and too many gorillas, and you don't want to pick up a fight with everybody. So this is something that either it is done like halfway through or not done at all, but hardly ever is done fully. As we said, it's a thing with the identity that evolves over time. You don't have to be pedantic and spend months designing your roles and access rights, but at least to a certain extent,
you should have a plan.
You should have a plan, yes. And so, yeah, these two, I would say that in reality are quite often not addressed properly. The rest more or less is there, like networking you need to do. If you have on-premise data center, you need connectivity, you will do it. Account structure you probably will do to a certain extent, whether you use 10 accounts, sub-accounts, or 5, that's up to your organizational structure. Landing zone, it depends also what do you do, like do-it-yourself landing zone, or you use some of the managed landing zones, like I mentioned, Control Tower. In that case, it creates landing zone according to the best practices and guardrails for you. If you do it yourself and use some services on your own, it still can be very good, right? But maybe there is easier way.
Yeah. Okay. And any last I don't know, learnings or takeaways, biggest challenges? Usually is it people or figuring out the applications or anything that's usually difficult?
What I usually tell to customers is like don't rush with this part, right? Using a cloud is very exciting. Everybody wants to start as soon as possible, but don't skip some of the mandatory foundational steps because it's going to hurt you later on the long run, and it's very hard to roll back and reduce something if you haven't done the foundation. Like if the foundation is bad and you have built a whole house, it's going to shake for a long time. So I would say take the time, think through these things, do them properly. Doesn't need to be perfect, doesn't need to be 100%, but if there is a plan, if there is a thinking done, it's going to be much easier later on. Yeah,
absolutely. Totally resonates with me. I mean, it's always, you need a plan. It's not doing whatever or not caring. It's about having a plan and really evolving it, but it needs to sit together so you see what you are aiming for when you are kind of doing step by step and doing all the different pieces that need to be done eventually. So that makes all sense, and we now have really the foundation in place. So what's next? What will we be covering in the next 2 episodes?
Yeah, so now we have connected that old century castle with the new Wakanda city,
Right.
with the road, and we have set up all the infrastructure foundation in the new shiny city. We can now open the gates and get all the cars and carriages and move slowly towards the brand new habitat.
Yeah.
And so in the next episode we can talk about cloud migration. So what does it mean to now migrate applications from on-premise to the cloud? So what are the steps involved? How do you dissect your existing applications and use this approved set of services to compose it in the cloud? That would be next. And then once you are there, once you have your applications and data in cloud up and running, I would say the final piece to consider is operations. So how do you run them? How do you maintain? What are the logging mechanisms? What are the alerting? What are the metrics that you need to be aware of for each of the applications, so that you can have a proper operations of your applications in the cloud?
Yeah, cool. So that will be wrapping up the entire series we have around Cloud Journey.
Yeah.
And we hope you like it, and stay tuned for the next episodes here.
Sure, yeah. See you around.
See you around. So if this is a relevant topic for your business, just contact us so that we can help you.
If you like what we are doing, please subscribe to our channel and like our videos.
And also, you can give us feedback and also suggestions for topics that you would like us to discuss and go into more detail.
In any case, stay tuned and see you soon.